All right, let's get into this pile of readings you sent our way.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like you're really interested in like the laws that determine how nature grows
Mm-hmm.
and what keeps things in check.
Mm.
You know, from trees to rivers to deer populations.
Yeah, it's really a journey into understanding nature's balancing act.
Yeah.
And what I find so intriguing is how these principles apply across like such vastly different scales.
Right.
You know, we're talking about from like the microscopic level of cells to the macroscopic level of entire ecosystems.
Exactly. We've got articles here about island ecosystems.
Yeah.
The bell curve's appearance in nature, even ancient philosophies like yin and yang.
Yeah.
It's quite a lot to unpack.
Yeah,
So we're going to focus on what we think is going to be like the most fascinating and insightful stuff for you.
Sounds good. Yeah, let's start with the concept of growth.
Okay.
You know, it's not just about things getting bigger.
Right.
It can be about populations spreading, ecosystems kind of evolving, or even organisms developing in complexity. But here's the catch. There are always limits. You know, resources, competition, predator-prey relationships, these all play a role in this delicate dance of balance.
It's like that example with the deer on the island.
Yeah.
At first, there's a ton of resources and the population just explodes.
Exactly.
But then food becomes scarce, competition heats up, and things start to level out.
Yeah.
That's carrying capacity in action.
Exactly. The island, basically has a limit to how many deer it can sustainably support.
Right.
And this concept of carrying capacity isn't just limited to, isolated islands. It's relevant to all species, even humans.
Right.
You know, the Earth has a finite amount of resources.
Yeah.
Your understanding carrying capacity is crucial when we think about population growth, resource consumption, and our environmental impact.
Yeah. It's a little bit of a sobering thought.
Yeah.
But it really makes you realize how interconnected everything is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one change can have like a ripple effect throughout the whole ecosystem.
For sure.
It reminds me of another concept that you mentioned, the logistic growth curve. Is that related to carrying capacity?
Absolutely. The logistic growth curve is basically a mathematical model that describes how populations grow in environments with limited resources.
Okay.
So instead of growing exponentially forever, they tend to follow an S-shaped curve
Right.
and eventually level off as they approach the carrying capacity.
Mm-hmm.
It's a way of visualizing nature's tendency to find that equilibrium point.
So nature's always trying to find that sweet spot, that balance between growth and its limitations.
Exactly. And it's fascinating how this plays out in the microscopic world as well.
Okay.
Take Liebig's law of the minimum, for instance.
Okay.
It states that growth is controlled not by the total amount of resources available,
Okay.
but by the scarcest resource.
So it's like the saying, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link.
Precisely. Imagine a plant that needs sunlight, water, nitrogen, and phosphorus to grow.
Okay.
Even if it has plenty of everything else, if the soil is lacking in nitrogen, its growth will be stunted.
So it's about having enough of the right things, not just enough in general.
Exactly.
Does that apply beyond just plants?
Absolutely. It applies to animal populations, ecosystems, even human societies.
Wow.
Understanding which resource is the limiting factor can help us focus our efforts
Right.
on addressing those specific limitations.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like finding the bottleneck and then creating a targeted solution.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this deep dive is already making me think about resource management in a whole new light.
Yeah. And speaking of resource management,
Okay.
let's talk about how organisms utilize those resources.
Right.
That brings us to the fascinating realm of metabolic scaling theory,
Right.
which explores the relationship between an organism's size and its metabolic rate.
Metabolic rate meaning how quickly it burns energy.
Yes,
So bigger animals burn energy proportionally faster.
not quite. The relationship is not linear. It's what we call allometric.
Okay.
As organisms get larger, their metabolic rate increases at a slower rate than their body mass. This has profound implications for how they function and interact with their environment.
So like a mouse might have a racing heartbeat and a short lifespan compared to an elephant whose internal processes are running at a different pace.
Precisely. Metabolic scaling also influences ecological interactions.
Okay.
Like predator-prey dynamics and the flow of energy through food webs.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fundamental principle that shapes the way life on Earth is organized.
Okay, so we've got carrying capacity, setting limits on growth.
Right.
Liebig's law, highlighting the importance of specific resources,
Mm-hmm.
and metabolic scaling theory, showing us how energy use changes with size.
Yeah.
It's all starting to connect.
And this intricate web of connections extends even further when we consider natural selection and evolution.
Oh, yeah?
It's the driving force behind the incredible diversity and adaptation we see in nature.
Ah, yes. Survival of the fittest, right?
Yes.
Like how chameleons can blend in or dolphins have streamlined bodies for swimming. They've evolved to thrive in their environments.
Exactly. Natural selection favors those with traits that make them better suited to their environment.
Right.
And over time, this can lead to the evolution of new species and incredible adaptations.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that natural selection is not a conscious process.
Right.
It's driven by the environment selecting for the most advantageous traits.
It's like nature is constantly running experiments
Yeah.
and then selecting the best solutions.
Yeah.
That makes me wonder, within this process of evolution, are there like specific principles that help us understand nature's balancing act even further?
Absolutely. One crucial principle is the principle of allocation.
Okay.
It states that organisms have a limited amount of energy and resources to allocate to different life functions like growth, reproduction, maintenance, and defense.
So it's like a budgeting problem for organisms.
Exactly.
They have to decide how to spend their energy wisely.
Exactly. And the way they allocate their resources depends on their environment, their life history strategy, and the trade-offs they face. For instance, a plant in a nutrient-poor environment might allocate more resources to root growth to enhance nutrient uptake, even if that means sacrificing some energy for flower production.
So it's a trade-off between investing in growth versus investing in reproduction.
Yeah.
Fascinating how these choices shape the evolution of life.
And it highlights the importance of understanding how organisms prioritize different functions to maximize their overall fitness in their specific environments. But it's not just about individual organisms.
No.
We also need to consider how interactions between different species contribute to the balance of nature.
That makes sense. We've talked about competition for resources, but how does that play out in the bigger picture of an ecosystem?
Well, that brings us to the competitive exclusion principle.
Okay.
It states that two species competing for the exact same resources cannot stably coexist.
So it's like a winner-take-all scenario.
Right.
But how do species avoid this constant clash in the real world?
One way is through niche differentiation, meaning they specialize in different ways.
Okay.
They might utilize different resources, occupy different habitats, or be active at different times of day.
So it's like dividing up the resources, finding a way to share the pie.
Exactly.
Does this play a role in the incredible biodiversity we see in nature?
Absolutely. Niche differentiation is a key driver of biodiversity, allowing a greater variety of species to coexist in a given ecosystem. So competition, while it can be fierce, can also be a force for innovation, driving species to specialize and diversify.
It's amazing how even competition, which we usually think of as negative, can contribute to the richness and complexity of life on Earth.
And that's just one example of how the principles we're discussing weave together to create this incredible tapestry of life.
Right.
It's truly mind-boggling to consider all the complex interactions happening constantly all around us.
Right. And yet, amidst all this complexity, there's this remarkable sense of order and equilibrium.
Yeah.
It's like nature has this innate ability to self-regulate and maintain balance. It's humbling and inspiring at the same time.
I completely agree. It makes you realize that we're not separate from nature. We're a part of it.
Yeah.
And understanding these principles is crucial, not just for appreciating the natural world, but also for learning how to live more sustainably within it.
Well said. This deep dive is already making me think about things in a whole new light. I can't wait to delve further into these concepts and see what other insights we can uncover.
Let's keep exploring. We've only just begun to scratch the surface of this fascinating subject.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is a journey of discovery, isn't it?
Yeah.
Each concept we uncover seems to open up a new pathway of understanding. And speaking of pathways, let's delve a bit deeper into the world of branching structures.
Okay.
You have a few articles here exploring how this pattern appears everywhere in nature,
Right.
from trees to river systems to our own blood vessels.
I've always found branching patterns fascinating.
Yeah.
They're beautiful visually, but there's clearly a functional aspect to them as well, right?
Exactly. Branching is one of nature's most efficient strategies for distributing resources and maximizing surface area.
Right.
Think about a tree, for example.
Okay.
Its branches reach out in all directions, capturing sunlight for photosynthesis. And the intricate network of veins in a leaf ensures that every cell receives the nutrients it needs.
And it's not just limited to plants, is it?
Right.
Our circulatory system relies on branching blood vessels to deliver oxygen and nutrients throughout our body.
Precisely. And rivers branch out to create a network of waterways that distribute water across vast landscapes.
Right.
It's like nature has found this universal design principle that works across different scales and systems. What's even more remarkable is that these branching patterns often follow specific mathematical rules.
Wait, so it's not just random branching, it's optimized branching.
Yeah.
There are actual formulas behind these seemingly organic structures.
You got it. For example, there's Murray's Law, which describes the optimal relationship between the diameters of parent and daughter branches in a network.
Right.
It's all about minimizing energy loss during fluid transport. Nature is constantly refining its designs to achieve maximum efficiency.
That's incredible. It makes me think of how engineers design transportation networks or even plumbing systems. Are we essentially mimicking these natural branching patterns?
In many ways, yes. Understanding these principles can help us create more efficient and resilient systems.
Wow.
Whether we're designing infrastructure or managing complex organizations.
So branching is great for distributing resources, but are there limits to how much branching can occur?
Right.
A tree can't just keep growing taller and taller forever, can it?
You're exactly right. There are always limits.
Yeah.
Factors like energy efficiency, material strength, and flow resistance all come into play.
Right.
Eventually, the costs outweigh the benefits.
Okay.
For instance, a tree that grows too tall might become unstable and susceptible to damage from wind.
It's like nature is saying, branching is great, but let's not get carried away.
Right.
We need to find that sweet spot where complexity and efficiency are balanced.
I love that analogy. It perfectly captures the essence of nature's balancing act.
Yeah.
And this idea of balance brings us to another fascinating concept you mentioned, the ancient Chinese philosophy of yin and yang.
Oh, yes. The symbol with the black and white teardrop shapes swirling together. I remember learning a bit about it in a philosophy class, but I never really connected it to science before.
Yeah, it's often seen as a purely philosophical concept.
Right.
But it actually resonates with many scientific principles.
Okay.
Yin and yang represent two complementary forces that make up the universe,
Okay.
often seen as opposing, but actually interconnected and interdependent.
So it's not about one force being good and the other bad,
Right.
but about understanding that both are necessary for creating harmony and balance.
Exactly.
Kind of like the predator-prey dynamic we discussed earlier.
Precisely. Think about day and night, for example. They seem like opposites, but they're two parts of the same cycle, each playing a vital role in sustaining life on Earth.
Right.
Daylight provides energy for photosynthesis,
Yeah.
while nighttime allows for rest and repair.
Okay. I'm starting to see how this concept could apply beyond just philosophical discussions. Could you give us another example of yin and yang at work in nature?
Certainly. Consider the cycles of growth and decay in a forest ecosystem.
Okay.
The breakdown of dead trees and leaves,
Okay.
often seen as decay or a negative force,
Right.
actually enriches the soil, providing nutrients for new growth.
Right.
The positive generative force.
Wow, that's a great example.
Yeah.
So even processes that we might perceive as destructive are actually essential for the overall balance and renewal of the ecosystem.
Exactly. And this idea of balance extends to the internal workings of organisms as well.
Okay.
That brings us to the concept of homeostasis, which you've touched upon in some of your readings.
Yeah. I remember reading about how our bodies regulate temperature, blood sugar levels, and all sorts of other things to keep us functioning properly.
Yeah.
It's like our own personal internal balancing act.
That's a great way to put it. Homeostasis is the ability of organisms to maintain a stable internal environment
Right.
despite what's happening outside.
Yeah.
It's a continuous process of adjustment and regulation, ensuring that internal conditions remain within a narrow range that's optimal for survival.
So whether we're talking about the dynamics of an entire ecosystem or the delicate balance within a single cell, this idea of homeostasis seems to be a unifying principle.
Absolutely. And it's a testament to the incredible complexity and interconnectedness of life.
Yeah.
From the tiniest microorganisms to the largest whales, every living thing is constantly striving to maintain this internal balance in the face of ever-changing conditions.
It makes you realize that we're not just individuals, but incredibly complex systems, constantly interacting with and adapting to our environment.
That's a profound insight, and it highlights the importance of understanding these principles, not just as abstract scientific concepts, but as fundamental truths that shape our very existence.
This deep dive is truly changing the way I see the world. Everything feels so much more interconnected and purposeful.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here? What other amazing concepts are hidden within this stack of readings?
Well, we've talked a lot about the mechanisms that govern life's processes, but to truly grasp the grand scheme of things, we need to explore the concept of time and how life on Earth has changed over millions of years. That brings us to the fascinating world of evolution.
Okay, I'm ready to journey back in time.
All right.
Let's see how these ancient forces have shaped the world we know today.
It really is a grand narrative, isn't it?
It is.
It's the story of how life on Earth has transformed over billions of years, from single-celled organisms to the incredible diversity we see today.
It's mind-boggling to think about all the twists and turns, the extinctions and adaptations that have led to this very moment. Yeah, it makes you feel incredibly small, but also connected to this vast history of life.
Exactly. And at the heart of this story is the process of natural selection, which we touched upon earlier.
Right.
It's the driving force behind evolution shaping life to fit the ever-changing conditions on our planet.
Right. We talked about how natural selection favors traits that increase survival and reproduction. But can you give us a simplified version of Darwin's theory?
Of course.
Just to make sure we're all on the same page.
Imagine a population of beetles with variations in color, some green, some brown.
Okay.
Now, let's say these beetles live on trees covered in green moss.
Okay.
The green beetles would be better camouflaged, making them less likely to be eaten by birds.
So the green beetles would have a survival advantage.
Right.
And would be more likely to reproduce, passing on their green genes.
Precisely. Over time, this would lead to a higher proportion of green beetles in the population.
Right.
This simple example illustrates the core principle of natural selection. Variations that provide an advantage in a given environment become more common over generations.
It makes sense. It's like nature is constantly filtering for the best solutions.
Yeah.
But it's not a conscious choice, right?
Right.
It's just the environment shaping the direction of evolution.
Exactly. And this process can lead to incredible adaptations like the streamlined bodies of dolphins for swimming,
Right.
or the echolocation abilities of bats.
Yeah.
But evolution isn't just about physical traits, it also shapes behaviors, physiological processes, and even the ways that organisms interact with each other.
It's amazing how much complexity can arise from such a seemingly simple principle.
Yeah, it is.
Like nature is constantly innovating, finding new ways to thrive.
And that's where another important concept comes in, the principle of allocation, which we discussed earlier in the context of individual organisms.
Right, like a budget for survival and reproduction.
Yeah.
But how does this principle relate to evolution on a grander scale?
Well, imagine two different species of birds. One that lays many small eggs and another that lays just a few large eggs.
Okay.
These represent different allocation strategies, each with its own advantages and disadvantages.
So the bird with many small eggs might be spreading its risk. Even if some chicks die, others are likely to survive.
Yeah.
While the bird with few large eggs is investing more heavily in each offspring, giving them a better chance in a competitive environment.
Exactly. And over time, natural selection will favor the allocation strategy that leads to greater reproductive success in a particular environment.
Okay.
This principle helps us understand why different species have evolved such diverse life history strategies.
It's like nature is testing out different solutions.
Yeah.
Constantly fine-tuning the balance between survival and reproduction. It makes me wonder, how do all these interconnected species, each with its own allocation strategy and evolutionary path,
Right.
manage to coexist within an ecosystem?
That's a great question, and it brings us back to the concept of niche differentiation and the competitive exclusion principle. Remember, two species competing for the exact same resources cannot stably coexist.
Right. One will eventually outcompete the other.
Yeah.
But we see so much diversity in nature. So clearly species have found ways to share the resources.
Exactly. They do this by specializing, carving out their own unique niches within the ecosystem.
Okay.
Some might focus on specific food sources, others might be active at different times of day, and still others might adapt to different microhabitats within the same area.
So competition, while it can be a powerful force, can also be a driver of innovation.
Yeah.
Pushing species to diversify and find new ways to thrive.
Precisely. And this specialization ultimately contributes to the stability and resilience of the ecosystem as a whole.
Wow.
It's like a complex web of interconnected relationships, each species playing a role in maintaining the overall balance.
Wow, this deep dive has been incredible.
It has.
We've covered so much ground, from the fundamental laws of growth and energy use to the grand sweep of exution and the delicate balance of ecosystems. It's truly changed the way I see the world around me.
Me too. And I think
Yeah.
that's the real power of exploring these concepts. It's not just about acquiring knowledge, it's about shifting our perspective,
Right.
seeing the interconnectedness of everything and understanding our place within this intricate web of life.
Absolutely. And hopefully, this newfound understanding will inspire us to make more thoughtful and sustainable choices in our own lives.
Yeah, I hope so.
After all, we're not separate from nature. We're an integral part of it.
Well said. I think that's the perfect note to end on. Thank you for sharing these fascinating readings with me.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure exploring these concepts with you.
The pleasure was all mine. And to you, our listener, thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Yes, thank you.
We hope it sparked your curiosity and left you with a sense of wonder about the incredible complexity and beauty of the natural world.
Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.
Yeah.
There's always more to discover and more to learn about the amazing world we inhabit.
Until next time.